Nick Littlehales, thank you for joining me on the podcast. I was
Lewis.
I was really excited to actually get you on. Like I said just to you a minute ago, I've listened to you on a couple of podcasts, but having you on is awesome. Now I've heard the story of how you got into what you're doing now, but it'd be amazing to go through that again and also I think there's some elements within that story that I know for sure when I was listening to you tell it that had like questions myself at the time, and it would be good to delve into some of the areas of what you were actually doing, and then we'll get into the science and of sleep and what you do. So when did it start for you? What year and where and how?
It's kind of crazy and a little bit overwhelming that you started doing things on your own principally. Nobody really cared about the subject as we do today. So you're just developing this little journey that ends up in a book, and then suddenly everybody's fascinated by that journey. But along that journey, it was very sort of lonely and isolated, and lots of challenges. So it's really strange, and I've been repeating this story for the last 5 or 6 years, and so it principally was simply that I was very much into sport, like a lot of people would be in my early teens, and I was just trying to find any sport that I could become a professional in. But um, back in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, that long ago, sport was a very different environment to where it is today. So
Mm.
I just fell into what's classed as the furniture industry, um, because I sort of not necessarily failed, but I couldn't get into a professional setup, and I was getting older, 22, 23, 24. So I got married and I ended up falling into the furniture industry. Uh, I fell into a company that made sleeping products, and they were a big company. And along that journey, I started off driving a car around selling their products on the road just to pay the mortgage and bring up the family. Um, for whatever reason, I shifted through their ranks very quickly within 5 years to become their international sales and marketing director. The group was sold on to a much bigger organization in Europe, so we became a big sleeping comfort group. The company I worked for was very much a brand leader and innovator. So it was always my challenge to, connect the importance of sleep to products. But I did go all around the world looking at how people slept. I worked with some clinicians and professors in sleep, so I got a background in that sort of area. And I just sort of, in the end, it was sort of like that classic midlife crisis type point when I was, sat in my UK office in Oldham, Manchester in the UK, and I just thought, do you know what? There's no definitive guide to this from all the professors, the clinicians, the sleep scientists. They just deal with disorders, but they
Mm.
don't have any sort of guideline on how I can reveal this important sleep. The fact is, everybody takes it for granted.
Yeah.
It's not a performance criteria. So while the other health pillars get done to death, we just keep ignoring this thing. So I'd listened to lots of myths and misunderstandings. I I sort of questioned, well, how can you say that when this happens? So I think I just built up a lot of conversations, experience that just didn't make sense.
Mm.
So I was about to leave my job. I'd handed in my notice, 12 months, director's contract, and I was going to go off and do something completely different. But right at that moment in time, the local football club called Oldham Athletic contacted me to say, would you give us some money to sponsor the shirts? And I just went, well, fine. Why not? I'll give you some money. You're a local football team. We'll put the company name on the shirt, which happened to be Slumberland Beds, basically. And so suddenly the media got really interested in the fact that this football club had got a bedding company on the front of their shirt. What's all that about? It meant I got invited to one or two little football events, because I was the guy who wrote the check out.
Mm.
And so I actually bumped into Alex Ferguson there. Local football club called Manchester United. A lot of the clubs around there were breeding grounds for players, for people like Manchester United. So the Neville brothers, England players,
Yeah.
well-known players, they came from the Bury area. Paul Scholes came from Oldham Athletic. So it was very much a sort of UK oriented team at that time, back in the late 90s. So I was just having a conversation, and that ended up me talking to Manchester United. That ended up me talking to a guy called Dave Fever, who was the physio there at the time. And we just started dialogue about the subject of sleep recovery. And it very much started with a physical thing, because one of the players had a lot of lower back issues, and they were spending a lot of money trying to protect that, Lewis. And because my principal competence was in sort of designing products for people to lie on and rehabilitate from, i.e. sleep on, we just made one or two little adjustments to what he was doing, and there was a significant improvement. Didn't solve it, Lewis, but there was a significant improvement, not only for the player, but also his partner, who was suffering from the situation. So suddenly they sort of like, well, what else could we do? And I think the open-mindedness of Alex Ferguson at that time. There was another manager called Sam Allardyce, who was just up the road at Bolton, who also had a much broader open-mindedness to bringing in things that sport would never even think about. So I think if it was any other club that I was having some sort of conversation with at that time, it wouldn't have gone anywhere. It just happened to be a set of circumstances of Alex Ferguson with a young team, a new developing team, the class of 92. He very much liked what I was talking about and sort of got involved with it himself. The physio Dave Fever was really interested in it. So we started to sort of develop the conversation. And so, to cut a long story short, suddenly I find myself talking to the national England squad, because a lot of those players played for England. Then I'm suddenly talking because of Gary Lewin, who was the physio of England, but also Arsenal. Suddenly I was talking to him. Then Arsene Wenger came along, some 22 years ago, this bespectacled French guy who was completely different. So that was a completely different thing. And he was looking at things in a completely different way. So it's like, get Nick in to talk to the players. And you just go, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Suddenly, I'm now talking to first team squads, multicultural, Arsenal particularly, about sleep. So literally, I just woke up one morning, and in those days, social media and phones and technology was a long way away. So you would read it in the papers, and the press had just put two and two together and said, like, these pampered football players have got a sleep coach who's tucking them in and reading bedtime stories, no doubt, or whatever. Because nobody. So it was kind of like, I thought, well, I'm a sleep coach, am I? Right. So using all the sorts of sales and marketing, the experience, the knowledge, I just put all that together and tried to come up with a way to present the subject, to try and understand some of the issues where we could redefine the language a little bit. And then, British Cycling in 2008, into London 2012. Here we are today, a book gets written, and that sort of journey has been very sort of isolated along that route. But all it's been is, how do we solve that issue?
Yeah.
Because I think, Lewis, it's my 60th year this year, and I've lived a big chunk of my life without 24/7 and technology. And the paradigm shift between the late 90s to where we are now is just an unrecognizable set of circumstances. And I think that's why all along that route, I've been giving up almost every day. I've been going bust every day. I've been challenged to give it up and do something else every day. But every now and again, something crops up. And it just kept me going along that route. And whilst there was a big subject around sleep over the last few years, and it's getting blamed for all sorts of things, I think it's really great that we're all talking about it. But I think there is this sort of, if you go from a taken for granted, not performance criteria, no education, myths and misunderstanding, and then you suddenly jump into it, with trackers, devices, supplements, this and everything else. There's a great danger. You've just gone from zero to trying to be a hero in it that quickly, where you can create other problems. So I think it's just a nice old place to be. But that's the story. It's still going on. It doesn't stop.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that's sort of around about when you were talking about Sir Alex Ferguson and being introduced to the England team, that the reason why that was happening is because it was working. So what were the results that you were seeing? What were the things that the players were doing that you addressed? And were there commonalities? Was it a player by player basis? Obviously, everyone is different, and we can get into sort of chronotypes and AMers and PMers and things like that later on. But what were the challenges that you were being faced with those players at that time? And I think you're right, even as you started to explain there, that now is a completely different set of circumstances for players, and the stresses that are potentially on them are different. But when you originally started and you were seeing results, what were those initial things you were doing?
Oh, you're going to smile, mate. You're going to smile because, obviously now there's a technique, there's a broader understanding. We've done a lot more with it. But back then, I didn't even know what I was doing. I didn't, what are you asking me to do? So if I have a conversation with the physio and we go, look, lower back, da-da-da-da, he would say, well, most of the time the player's away from me in his own home, but we have no control on what he's lying on, his pillows, his this, how he goes about. So every time he comes back to the club, I just Dave came up with the word rehabilitating him, because he's debilitating when he jumps into his Ferrari, slouched down, drives home. He's putting. So literally, it was protecting posture, right? So we go, well, let's talk to all the other players, because if they don't know anything about sleeping products, they just choose them in the shop or send their partners out to get them, because it's not a thing that they buy, and who cares what it is. So maybe we could have some effect on injury times. Maybe we could reduce injury times, or because we've got them sleeping in the right way on the right products. Okay, so nothing more than that. So can you talk to the players about that? Nothing more than what have you got at home? What type of mattress have you got? What type of pillow have you got? What sort of positions you get into? And it's sort of like, well, we don't know anything about this. So it's kind of like, as you know, the staff and the manager want to have 100% of the player, but they can't. No. So they're restricted to maybe 15, 20%. So there's all this time that they're away from the nice cotton wool of the club, and they don't know what they're doing and all that sort of stuff. So this was one of those things of saying, this is not actually about coaching football and techniques and everything else. This is actually something that you're doing as an individual, as a player, away from the club. So we would like you to talk to Nick as the outside influencer here, and maybe he can help you get stuff in your home or whatever that could make a difference to your physical posture, because we've been helping this other player. So by word of mouth, they start to talk. So the first player at that time who was really, he was Ryan Giggs, and he was really outside of the box back in the late 90s. So he was very much, if you talked about peripheral vision, if you talked about yoga, if you talked about meditation, anything like that, he would adopt it. So he was one of the first people who went, come and have a look at my house, check my environment, check my product, see if you can have any influence over it, right? So it's kind of really silly, because the players were becoming aware of, things that work and things that are counterproductive. And if you're just buying things from shops that are not sort of correctly profiled or don't equal, that could be linen, pillow. So anyway, to cut it short, those players go to the Euro Champions 1998 World Cup, and they're based in a big resort in northern France. Okay, and so these players wander in, and they just go, "We've got blankets and scratchy sheets. The pillows are rubbish. The mattresses are too hard and don't release. And the sort of Sven-Goran Eriksson at the time and Gary Lineker, and even the marketing guy for the FA called Andy Oldknow, is still a great friend today. We're just going, what are these guys on about? We've got a golf club, we've got fantastic 5-star facilities, everybody's got this and everything. And they're kind of questioning the pillows and the mattresses. So I sent a transit van full of products that I sort of, knew myself, sort of tick some box, and sent them out to the hotel for them to put them on the players' beds.
Bloody hell.
So what happened? So all it was initially was, this is an area that we know absolutely nothing about. We just take absolutely no notice. But the fact is that while these players are with us for 2 or 3 weeks, they're staying in this facility, and 30-odd% of all the time they will be here, they will be in that room sleeping on those products. Hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Hang on a minute. Maybe there's an error. So it was a bit like that. And then suddenly this sort of conversation started to change when Sir Alex Ferguson decided that he was going to double up training sessions pre-season.
Yeah.
So they're not only training in the morning, but they're training in the afternoon, right?
Yeah.
So David moved on by then, and the physio at Manchester United was Rob Swire. So we just went, what are you going to do with the players in between training sessions? So we decided, I knew about napping, but you can't talk to players about napping. It's a loser thing.
Yeah.
So we sort of said, well, let's create a room. And in there, we'll put some lounging type products, not beds, because that's too much of a leap. Let's put some lounging type products, and we'll talk to the players about, napping, try to talk about it in a different way, a controlled recovery period, whatever. That it would be very beneficial to them to fuel up and hydrate, but then just go and have some time out. And if they have a little micro sleep or something like that, that will really prepare them well for the afternoon's training. And because Alex Ferguson had an enormous influence over those players, right, is they just went, okay, we'll try it. So the first recovery room, nap room, was some office space we cleared out and put some lounges in and tried to tell the players how to nap.
Yeah, that's sorry to interrupt, but that's fascinating. Even there, like most of this story that you're saying is really
97-98, mate.
Yeah, but it is really down to the one. You really struck gold with the fact that not only was it Manchester United that you were going with, but the fact that Sir Alex Ferguson was so forward thinking. You had players in there, and even having been in a professional sporting environment, there is an element where some of the stuff you were saying there was, well, a lot of those players could have just like fobbed it off and not done it because it's here comes a guy trying to tell me how to sleep. I think I sleep okay. That's fine. What do I know?
Hey,
but
testosterone, young players, no fear. The last thing they will be doing is going, I've got a problem with sleep, because that's just a negative.
It's a really good point. Really good point.
It's totally unique. Not planned for. It just happened to be those conversations. And so it sounds really strange, but that's how it started. Gary Lewin, Dave Fever, Rob Swire started to think like, hang on a minute, we've just touched on some mattresses, pillows and duvets. Now we're talking about fetal positions and postural care, which makes sense to us as physios. Now we're sort of talking about how we can not only have impact on the players away from us when they go into their bedrooms, don't just send them up there, see you in the morning, have a good night's sleep. We can start to influence the players of what they're doing when they're away from the club in their homes. Maybe we can think about the hotels, because we just pile into those hotels. They're not designed for elite athletes or players. Anybody could have been in that hotel the night before with all sorts of stuff. And we're expecting them to go out and perform at the highest level. So it was kind of like that sort of and I think one of the biggest shifts that we had was because we created this little recovery room at Manchester United, and because quite a number of the players would go there and just lounge, and some eventually started nodding off for a bit because they started to understand that was a very natural process. So hanging around playing snooker or pool or watching gaming on the TVs and just lounging on the sofas was not good for them to go out and train again. But you also have to remember that most of the players were UK bred, right?
Right.
It wasn't a big cultural shift, not like Arsenal. You had players from all over the place. So that's another story when you start talking to them, because trying to get Cesc Fabregas, a Spaniard, to go out and train in the afternoon, you're struggling because he's in siesta mode, right?
Yep. Yeah.
But I think what happened is suddenly they started to see that maybe some of the players' data, whatever it might be, if we kept it simple, maybe a sprint, right, between A and B. And the data was collected. And so some of the players created that data, some of the players. So those are the faster ones. These are the slightly slower ones. In the afternoon, it switched around.
Really? Right.
Suddenly we go, why is that happening? Because those players create that data in the morning, but they create this data in the afternoon. What's going on? And I just went, well, to be honest, I don't know how to put this to you, but it's probably chronotypes. What's that? Well, you can see that those players there are quite clearly night owls. Right? They come into the club still asleep. They haven't had breakfast. They haven't been up that long. They've just jumped into the car and driven to the training ground. And they're dragging themselves through the day. But if you see those three over there, they're running around like spring bunny rabbits, you know. So what's happening here is probably that you're now collecting data with the players, but a different part of the day. And it could be because of that. So if we could help those players on their route into the training, maybe using some things, and we could take notice of that. And what happened was certain players that would always be on the subs bench because of the data, you know, they're okay, they're good, but they're just not as quick or not as fast or standing. Suddenly, their data in the afternoon was better than the other ones. So I think, you know, Alex started to see, and the coaches did see that maybe they're getting a skewed view of the individual players because they only trained at a certain time. Now, you roll that on to where we are now, and you get people, you know, they're training when they only play games. So they train at 12:30, you know, 1:30, 4:45, 7:45. They train at those times to try and create the data that gives them the information about what happens with the team or individuals when they're actually playing matches in those times. So you've gone from sort of 3 o'clock Saturday afternoon to, you know, 3 or 4 games a week. All the media puts the games as far as TV is concerned. So suddenly you start to see the big shift. But back then, that was, you know, that's the kind of thing that opened up that subject. And then it sort of, as the next stage came along, you know, you start thinking about how to redefine their thoughts about sleep and change that process. But that's really what was going on in those initial stages. It was just, we did that opened up that subject, that created that, and that sort of looked at that. And then suddenly, you know, you end up going to the Euro 2004 Championships in France with the England squad. And they had a unique situation where the hotel was going to be their base for the whole tournament. So they're not moving around. So they completely took over this hotel. And I went over with all the pre-team and we looked at all the rooms, sun up, sun down, this, that, everything. We went through that with the club doctor, Lee Sward, and Gary Lewin, the physio. And we ended up shipping products out to the hotel.
Wow.
That were aligned to the profiles of the individual players. And we put certain players in certain rooms. We gave them protocols about keeping the curtains shut because the sun is rising that side and going down that side. We changed the product. So this hotel suddenly realized that, you know, we came in and took their product out and put ours in. And they just said, what are you doing? It's perfectly good product. But that was the first sort of set of circumstances where we were trying to put all these little things together. Yeah. And they were starting to go, look at the player, look at this, look at that, don't just accept that. Let's make a change. And then, as you know, from 2004 to around 2008, when British Cycling and Team Sky and the challenges of British cycling in all its forms was set up. Then the aggregation of marginal gains was the thing to make a difference, and they couldn't ignore sleep. So I got involved with that process, and that just enabled us to sort of put everything that had been going along that journey into a sort of umbrella technique. This is what you do. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if you knock the door on those little areas and make subtle little changes, awareness, understanding, education, whatever it might be, or just not actually sleeping with a pillow because they get in the way and cause problems. All that little journey is you can completely shift somebody's approach to sleep and what they think about it and how they approach it. And that's really from that period of sort of, it did help, Lewis, that Manchester United went ahead and did something that was just put them on the map, which was win the treble. And that just put them on the map. So anything they were doing, the press, the media were so fascinated with. So, of course, if they've got somebody going around talking to the players about sleep and stuff like that, and then, that was a bigger subject than it normally would be. Because they're on the treble.
Yeah, it is a fascinating story. I would like to I would like to talk about the.
Just up your whole podcast with that one. The one thing that I think is important to point out is because I coach a lot of young players now. They might be 14, 15, 16 years old. They're going on that journey. I was even coaching somebody from Australia last week, a young lad going on his journey into professional football. And you just remind yourself of the class of 92, right? I'm an Aston Villa fan, so I don't care about Manchester United or nobody, right? So let's put that in context. As you look at Paul Scholes, the Neville brothers, right? You look at David Beckham, you look at Ryan Giggs, manager of Wales, right? Phil Neville, national women's team, Gary's influence, those guys could walk out onto that pitch now.
Yeah.
Right? They'd give most people, they're physically, they're a little slower. Of course. But they're still physically able to play that game at certainly a high level, right? So you have to say to yourself that if you're going to succeed, and the other one was Cristiano Ronaldo, who sort of came along to Manchester United, and everybody just thought he was a cocky little, running around the wings, doing all these tricks and getting nowhere. But then, it's safe to say that there isn't a sports science or coach professional on this planet who wouldn't tell you right now he is an elite athlete. Right? He's off the charts in certain areas. And he's still out there doing it now. So I think there's a really good example of how possibly, recovery, this bit away from your sport, the bit is about you personally. It's not about your team. It's not about the coaches. It's about how you look after yourself with your ability to do stuff. And there's great evidence there to say that if you still want to be doing your stuff in your 40s, if it's in football, or if you're, rowers, Olympic rowers, some of them are coming out of retirement at 40 and going back into Olympic squads.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that? Yeah. And I think it's the recovery element that if you get that right in the first bit, then everything, nutrition and all the other things will follow in a slightly different direction. If you start over there and try to come back and then make that happen, there's too much pressure in today's world.
Yeah, there's no doubt that those guys, clearly because they took an interest in those marginal gains, and that had a big impact on their longevity within their sport and how they played. And you have to, you do really have to be willing to do it. Like, recovery is a conscious effort. It is a conscious effort to do it right. Otherwise, you'll slip into doing the wrong things. And like you said, doing from an elite level, you'll slip into not drawing out as much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And
I heard
that,
a lovely little, it's pretty obvious and simple, but I saw it and I thought, wow, that's just got me. And it was actually, your first step is to be coachable. And it sort of sounds so simplistic,
yeah,
but that's what you say. You've got to sort of, there's no point learning about stuff. And if you're not actually going to open yourself up to actually learning from others, adopting their principles, having confidence in what they do, and actually adopt it. You've got to be coachable. You can't just go, I'm not doing that because, I'll do that, but I won't do that. I won't do that. I won't do that. So I think that is really key for elite athletes in today, is to accept that there's new things coming across every minute of the day, right? We're in such a fast-moving world that what you were doing yesterday could be improved tomorrow because something's happened, or we've learned something, or a piece of research, or a device, or intervention. And that's the fascinating thing about it, is that's why I think being coachable is a good term, because we're in constant being bombarded with stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And you've got to keep a really open mind. But just what you were doing last week doesn't mean to say you're doing it this week.
Yeah, no. I'd like to talk about as you touched on it slightly, about chronotypes and your morning larks and night owls. So I personally consider myself now, well, it's a tough one. I consider myself a night owl. But I would say there was elements where I was a morning lark, but definitely I do adhere to more of a night owl lifestyle. When you talk about the fact that you had players that were training better in the afternoon sessions and training, well, not so well in the morning, and then you kind of allowed them to nap throughout the day, were there shifts in the team in a sense of they started looking at the way they trained differently? So were they coming in at different times? Was the team allowing them to come at different times and train different way? Did it then did it select people in a different way? And
you sometimes, because it's such a long time ago, and because we weren't taking pictures, we weren't recording things. We'd only got phones, and we didn't have any social, so everything was sort of done in a sort of verbal, live, in that space moment. So it's not easy to look back and record what some of the things that we were doing, but it very much started that conversation off. So it was kind of, maybe we'll get that group to do that intensity workout in the morning, but we'll get the other group to do this one. And then we'll switch it in the afternoon, rather than just doing it the same for everybody. So there was little tiny things that started to happen. But, in the very early stages of talking about this subject, making changes was difficult. And it was about subtle little changes that the staff were doing all the little time and going, well, maybe we could do that. But they had to do a lot of convincing themselves to change things. Football is a world that, still sort of Georgie Best, Brian Clough, kick it up the arse, get out there and do your stuff.
Yeah.
All this other stuff about sleeping and all that sort of, oh God, hang on a minute. So, but it was those little things that started to crop up. And as you started to develop those thoughts, you could see that, eventually you start sitting down thinking, okay, who takes the penalties?
Yeah.
Well, he does. And you go, well, we now have a game on, we have a game on Saturday afternoon. We've got another game on Tuesday night. And then we're back up down there, lots of traveling to get to that game on there. So who takes the penalties when we kick off at 7:45? And the penalties at, 5 to 10 in extra time, whatever it might be. Is it him or him? And it's kind of mad sort of conversation to say, in the scheme of marginal gains, you could see now, is that if that that person has a sort of genetic, natural twist to be an AMer, then it doesn't matter about all the cortisol and the adrenaline and the excitement and the crowd and oh my God, it's my big moment. Underpinning this is not his best place to be. You know?
Right.
Whereas the other player not only gets all of that buzz, but it's also a more natural place in that 24-hour rhythm. So just maybe you give them 100 penalties each under the same amount of pressure and change the timings, and you can just see a subtle shift that AM penalty taker in those timings for those games had a slightly better percentage than the other. And it slightly switched round a little bit when you put it in a night game, just a little bit.
Yeah.
So then the coach sits back and go, if it's tiny, I'll take that.
Yeah.
So you take the penalties. Yeah. If it happens to be at that part of the game or at that point in the game, it's you, right?
Yeah. And sorry to interrupt, like that's it's interesting that, because, and I think you mentioned it in your TED talk, that obviously the world does not adhere to a PMer's world, to a night owl's world, because it's get up in the morning, get your day done, and take control of the world like that. But if your best work can be done in the evening, then what's to say that there's anything wrong with that? But in sport, there's also an element of some non-negotiables. So let's take the England team and the World Cup when they had the penalty shootouts, and that's late at night. Now there's 5 guys that have got to take penalties, so there's a chance that one of them is an AMer, right? And there has to be an element. Was there ever an element of when you go, right, well, we can't control the start time of the game, so that we can't control when the race starts. But was there anything that you would do that would perhaps help someone who was better off in the evening, in getting better off in the morning, and then being able to draw out a performance in the evening from them, and sort of boost them up a little bit, and then vice versa?
I think just the knowledge, and then you suddenly start asking the questions, Lewis, and you go, okay, there's a group of people, could be 30 or 40 coaching staff, players, riders, whatever. There's a group of people there. There is also another group of people, which is all your friends and family and partners, which also influence you. Yeah? So we'll just do the test. And all we need to do is, if you had complete control over your everyday, what do you think your most natural wait time would be? 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock? And so there's an easy start. How do you feel when you wake up in the morning, whatever time you wake up? Are you starving? Are you ready to go? You just dive out of bed and crack on? Or do you don't like that period of time, but you'd like the evenings? You have that second wind and you're quite happy to be up at 12, 1 o'clock at night. So you only have to examine those little questions. And suddenly I think most of us, because we camouflage it, we ignore it, we can override it, we can just take no notice of it. So we can class ourselves as in-betweeners. But
right.
At the end of the day, when you sit back and look at it, and things like lockdown with the current climate that we're in, it kind of examines that a little bit for people. That if they've not got that everyday structure in place, that, don't put the alarm on, go to sleep, and just, so you're really 8 o'clock's your normal time really for you. So I think once that conversation starts, you then go, and like you pointed out, well, let's just do a little check with everybody, And so we suddenly see that we've got 70% of that group, 60 or 70% of that group actually identify with being nighttime people. So 40 or 30% are the AMs. So we've got a balance that's more towards that. So maybe we should look at what we do and when we do it and why we do it. And we also be very conscious that the person in charge of this team is an AMer.
Yeah.
But nearly 70% of his staff and players are not the same chronotype. So suddenly what happens is you start to think about everything. So like you say, you can't change things, but being aware of it. So you could start putting light therapy tools into the homes of the players who are PMers to help them get started, whereas the AMers don't. We put lighting into the training ground inside where they get changed, so that the high-level lux lighting would help the PMers get them going. And all this, so you start to do things in places where you can influence and change that process. Like you say, maybe changing one or two things in the training program, just to not put that particular person early in the morning through a very high intense training session when you know that they're not with you completely yet, but the AMer is. So there's little subtle changes, tiny little changes that start to sort of add up and develop into suddenly, even from the point of communications. So the manager or the coach would be there, you know, there's the PowerPoint presentation, the full squad are in the room, they're doing a tactical session at 9 o'clock before they go out training. Because they already know that all the people with the yellow vests on, for example, Lewis, I exaggerate, but all the players with the yellow vests on are PMers, all the players with the bright red vests are AMs. So what we do is we just change the communication and we go, right, this is the tactical session. And now one of the key points here, that 2 + 2 = 4, right? Now we know that all the guys in the red vests have got it. 2 + 2 = 4. What we know, all the guys with the yellow vests on, is they're going to wander around for a large chunk of the day going, it was 2 - 2 = 4. No, that doesn't work, does it? Was it 2? Well, why did they say that? What's 4 got to do with it? So we'd just send them a text. So we'd send that group a text in the afternoon, which went 2 + 2 = 4. And suddenly they just go, got you, right? So I'm exaggerating a little bit.
Yeah.
What you're saying is, don't just follow the same rule because you do these tactical meetings in the morning with all the players and the coaches. You do this with this and you do this with that. You do that with that. You know, you're very much aware that all the main influencers are all AMers, but you've got this difference. Maybe you start thinking about, when you look at the defense, you've got a number of players who play defense and they're all PMers. You just sign them because of their talent, because they're fight, whatever it is, but you didn't ask them the question, right? And it's the same within employment and workspaces, you know, is that maybe it should be on the interview list. Maybe you should be able to find that out without actually asking them, because if all your defense are PMers, what happens with the midday games?
Yeah.
Or you're putting your defense, what happens when somebody gets injured, or you need this or you need that? So you kind of start really looking at having a really nice balance of individuals. And I think you can certainly see there are certain teams that seem to have gone to a much higher level. They seem to have, sometimes it is about money and facilities. Yes, of course, but we all know you can't make talent by just giving somebody a load of money. You know, the structure has to be there. So when you look at things like Liverpool and you look at Manchester City, you start to see that clubs are just shifting to a different level, right? And I have to say, it's because in the background, it's not, you know, all about what I do, but you do see that changing habits and coaching techniques around these sort of things. So it's got very little to do with sleep, Lewis.
Yeah.
What's chronotype's got to do with sleep? What's changing your programs? But if you're able to tick these little boxes, then what happens is one of the biggest disruptors from being able to sleep is worrying about it. And so if you start to take all these little things into place, what happens is sleep becomes a really natural, very straightforward, easy process that you can do anywhere, anytime, in any place, on anything.
Yeah.
But if you're putting people and everybody under more pressure than you should and not taking advantage of that, then there's where your games lie. completely.
Yeah, it's definitely the approach. I think you're right that how people view it, how people adapt to it. I've actually been thinking that, and was speaking to my housemate today about the whole COVID-19, people locked down, a lot more flexible working, so people working from home, and even friends of mine back in the UK that were saying their businesses that they were working for pre-COVID assumed that they would never be able to do flexible working, and staying outside of a 9 till 5 regime would be near impossible. But my housemate, her work, they say, right, you've got 7 till 7, and you work your time shift throughout that. You figure out what you want, and that sounds like they've almost adopted this view on it. So funny enough, it's University of South Australia, so they're pretty
I've been in dialogue with that university over the years with various individuals, so it's always been interesting because they're quite at the forefront of stuff. But
yeah, they're forward thinking when it comes to that.
That's why I think that's why it's sort of interesting to look at it, because there's been quite a few people getting on and go, oh, Nick, I'm waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I feel wide awake and stuff like that. And I go, well, what are you worried about? He said, well, I've been in lockdown. What happens when I go back to work? And I can't be waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, but you're wide awake, yeah? What happens? I just smash on and do everything. It's amazing, yeah? Well, all you need to do is just whack a little 30-minute CRP in either midday or early evening just to get it balanced. And how many hours you getting? Well, I'm getting 4 cycles, 6 hours into 4 a.m., yeah? Well, you're just grabbing all that lovely deep stuff, either side of 12. It's very natural to wake up around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning if you're only a human being with a brain, so nothing really too dramatic about that. You're a morning chronotype, so that's fine. So why don't you just stick with it? Just because you have to work till 7 or start, use that time. It's your time. So where you sort of go, it's all about the evenings.
Yeah.
Rush home, get that done. There's only so many hours to go to bed. Amazing. Get your space, your personal space, get it at another point. So
yeah,
why not stick to it? And they go, so I can keep doing that. I said, well, you feel great. Yep. You're actually sleeping more. You're recovering more. Yep. So why would you want to change that when you go back to work full time?
So now we're kind of creeping into this polyphasic way of thinking about sleep, aren't we? Which is what you speak a lot about. If you could explain what you mean, especially by CRP and also polyphasic, and I guess that's your R90 approach, really.
Yeah. Well, that's a big old subject, and it's sometimes a little confusing to try and put it across audibly. But I've shared some slides with you. You've got some little things, so maybe we can use that. I think principally, as in that sort of paradigm shift since the late 90s and just 24/7 technology, and then we've got schedules, athletes all over the planet doing all sorts of things. So there's sort of 8 hours at night in one block, consistent weight, it just doesn't work. And it doesn't work for a big chunk of the population. So all I thought was, if I got to change your mindset of it, what I do know is in the clinical environment, that the clinicians would look at a 90-minute period, taking brainwave patterns from the frontal lobe, and then they benchmark it against the next 90 minutes. Some would look at 60 minutes. The majority looked at 90 minutes from the people I knew. So 5 90-minute cycles is 7.5 hours. So there's the 8. We've got 5 cycles. So we're not thinking about hours. Get your 8 hours. Now we've got cycles. So we're kind of starting to redefine this subject sleep. So I've got a 5-cycle routine. Okay. 90 minutes is the length of a football game.
Mm-hmm.
So a long time ago, trying to talk to young footballers about you can't play for 90 minutes. You have to have a break. A little 15-minute window to maybe hydrate, maybe take on a bit of fuel, but also to, re-strategize and then move to the next half, right? So 90 minutes, length of a game, little break, Then we started looking at, okay, if we've got a natural chronotype wait time, maybe we can start with that. And if we chop the day up into 90-minute cycles on the hour or half hour, so we don't have to think about it. We don't want 7:26 and this.
Yeah.
On the hour and a half. Yeah. So for anybody, they can just get that. So, right. So your natural chronotype wait time might be 8 o'clock. It could be 8:30, but let's pick 8, right? And then we'll just chop the 24 hours up. So we got 16 timings. So if your occupation demands that you have to wake up earlier, then all you do is your occupational wait time is just a 90-minute cycle back from 8. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Becomes 6:30.
Yeah.
So you sort of suddenly you've got wake times that are consistent, and circadian rhythms. It's all about rhythm, pattern, and harmony. Brains and human brains, bodily functions, and clocks. It's all about rhythm, pattern, and harmony. It's not about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's just a rolling process that goes on around us all the time. Mm. It's got no relationship to days of the week. It's just a rolling process, and we're rolling with that process. But the one thing it likes is a consistent wait time. But the first thing to establish is what would be your natural wait time and what is your occupational wait time. So is it a full cycle before your natural one, or full 2 cycles before your natural one? So you can start to map out your day.
Yeah.
And we look at the first phase, the second phase, the third phase, and the fourth phase of this particular process, that 24 hours. And what you do in the first phase of that day, from your point of wait to midday, early evening, and then into 12. And it's all about that relationship with light and everything else. You've also got the ability to, because you're looking at it in cycles, what do you do in the first 90-minute cycle from the point of wake? Really key. Do you take tiny little distracted breaks every 90 minutes, just for a couple of minutes? Little distracted break, point the brain at something else. Nice bit of recovery. You can look at midday, a little 90-minute or 30-minute cycle, because 30 minutes is 30% of 90, which equates to a nap, which equates to a 30-minute period. We call that a controlled recovery period rather than a nap, because nap indicates you're not doing things right. It's negative.
Yeah.
So we'll call it a controlled recovery, because we're not actually trying to sleep. Yep. We can't force sleep. We can't try to sleep. Our brain does it for us. And all we have to do is have a better relationship with what it likes to do every 24 hours. So we might take the early evening one to take the pressure off that. Now we can overlay this with 5 cycles would be a classic one, which I work to, is a 6:30 wait time, because I'm an AMer. So 5 90-minute cycles takes you 11 o'clock. So there's your 5 90-minute cycles between 11 and 6:30. First 90 minutes, I don't become a sleep coach till 8 o'clock, because it's all about getting myself going. Yeah. Pre-sleep starts 90 minutes before 11 o'clock. But now we've got crazy sport time. Or we've got doctors, surgeons, parents, all sorts of people who work different things, night shifts. So maybe I can choose to do 4 cycles. That would be 12:30 into 6:30. And that would be 6 hours, not 7.5. But if I can focus what I do throughout the day, maybe I can get better quality from those 6 hours. As long as I balance it with little distracted breaks every 2 minutes and my little 30-minute cycle early evening, because it takes the pressure off the evening, means I can sleep later. Okay, so now we've got a kickoff at 7:45. So what you do is you're able to have something really subconscious in your head that every day you wake up at the same time. If you have to shift that time, you just move back a cycle or forward a cycle. It's not just random. You realize that when you're going into that next 24-hour period, you might be playing a game that kicks off at 7:45. So you're not going to get back home until there, right? So maybe it's just 3 cycles tomorrow night, because I'm not going to get back until 1 o'clock. So I'm going to get 3 cycles into 6:30. But then the following day, I will take a 30-minute cycle midday just to balance it, as well as my early evening one. And then I'm back onto my 4 or 5 cycles again. So you can start to see that as coaches started to look, what happened was we started to think controlled recovery periods, CRPs. Don't talk about napping. No. Don't talk about sleep. We're talking about mental and physical recovery. We're talking about cycles, recovery cycles. And these happen all the time. It's not just focused on nocturnal stuff. It's going on all the time. It's like a really positive recovery activity program. That's as much as everything else. And we can actually go by, so it's 5 a day, is it? Yeah, 5 cycles. Does it have to be all in one block? Maybe not, because we can't do it anyway. So we look at the next 7 days, and we Monday, Tuesday, look at that. Oh, look how right. So we can, they'll come back there, we'll do that. Come back there, we'll do that. The objective is 35 cycles in a week. And what's a good rhythm for that? Well, if we've set them up with the knowledge, then maybe 28 90-minute cycles back to back nocturnally, 4 cycles a night, balanced with, another 7 30-minute cycles, dropped here, dropped there. So we've got our 35 cycles, which we're comfortable with. But if we start looking at something where it might drop below 28 90-minute cycles back to back, we're putting them under pressure, right?
Yeah.
Ideally, we want to be at 30 with 5 or whatever. So the coaches can now look at the next 7 days. They can see if that works. And if it works, they can tell the athletes that if they follow that particular approach, they will get the recovery that they need. If they don't, they will struggle. Right?
Yeah.
You will struggle if you don't do it. So that's why, if I answer your question, is certainly you start, you might open a conversation with, say, sleep, but immediately the barriers come down to what that actually means.
Yeah.
So you suddenly start going, cool, I'm on a 5 cycle routine, my 5 a day. It gets me this. I'm not a snoozer for loser. I've worked out how to do these little CRPs, and you wouldn't even know I was doing them. I could be in a crowded room everywhere. You wouldn't even know it was going on. Why do I do them? Why do I take 30 minutes out? Is it to go to sleep? No. Sometimes I might sleep, but sometimes I won't. But I just take 30 minutes out to protect my evening, so I get more product. So actually, you're sleeping more than you used to when you just tried to get 8 hours a night. Yeah. I'm getting better quality, better recovery. You're happier. There's all these little things going on. And suddenly it starts to reflect. And when you get change, which it happens every day, we're not in control, are we? So when you get something that happens, positively or negatively, that's going to impact on your day, you're not thinking, I've got to get my 8 hours tonight, right?
Yeah.
What you're thinking is, I just shift it to 3 cycles today, right? And I'll balance it tomorrow with that little one there and I'm fine. So it's almost as anything comes towards you, rather than hitting you like a brick wall or you jumping on it without thought, is it just goes in like that and you just go sorted.
I think this is a really great. I think this is so important, because I think there's so many people, and this is not just in sport. This is people that I've met that they will see their entire evening. Like if I don't know, if they're out late or something like that, and they're like, oh my God, I'm not going to get my 8 hours. I'm going to be completely ruined for the next day. It's because they're probably not thinking beyond that 24 hours. And that is when I think when I first heard about this method in your work, it takes a lot of stress out of the idea that, okay, I can become now essentially adaptable and a bit more resilient to whatever's coming at me. And an example that I used was someone was telling me about they were doing a meditation practice, and they were religious on their meditation practice at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they would do 20-30 minutes. And I was like, well, what if like your mother needed picking up at the airport at 6 o'clock in the morning? Are you going to tell her like, hold off, no, I've got to get this meditation done? Or can you adapt and move it throughout the day? Do you know what I mean? And because the way they were talking about it was if it was so ingrained in their well-being for that day that they were going to ruin themselves. And then I switched it over to sleep. I was like, well, okay, if I get 5 hours of sleep today, or 6.5, or whatever it is I'm going to get, how many cycles I might end up with, I'm already thought about what I'm getting. I'm already thought about what I'm doing in the next 2 or 3 days. And you're right there about planning for coaches. It's an amazing tool that you can then get, as long as you know how much recovery these guys are getting, and viewing it as recovery, because it is. Sleep is just simply recovery. It changes the mindset of how you go about your life.
You're describing it better than me, okay? And it is that it's for the coaches and for everybody. It just becomes really simple. Just like that's what's happening. over the next few days. There's your little window. You're going to be under pressure because you only get 3 cycles that night because we get back late and everything else. But you want to keep your consistent wait time. Don't sleep in because you'll just, don't want to do that. Get up. But what you can do is when we finish the recovery training program in the morning of that day and we send you home, is you can go home and you can do a 90-minute cycle to catch up, right? You could do a 30-minute, but do a 90 or a 90, right? But you don't do a 90 in the evening unless you, right? So you could put an alarm on, right? Because if you fall asleep and you haven't got that alarm on, you start rolling, you might go beyond it, right? And then you're in catch-up mode again. So this is a 90 or 30-minute cycle window, depending on how you feel. But you alarm both of them, right? So it's kind of, and then what's going to happen? Well, you'll have an amazing rest of the day. And you'll be even better when you come in for full training tomorrow. All right. So it's sort of like sleeping is this, like you said, wake up in the morning, there's only so many hours left. I've got to go to sleep to get my 8 hours sort of thing. And it's constant battle with it. And when things change, you worry about it. Oh, I got in at 2 o'clock. I'm not getting my 8 hours. I've got to be at training. And oh, God. And then suddenly a day comes when you haven't got to go to work and you just lie in bed all day and waste your day or whatever, catching up. So it kind of like, it just makes it a far more sort of, from an athlete's point of view, from anybody who's a high achiever or influencer, I think the objective was, could we find a way of not spending so much of our life asleep doing nothing?
Yeah.
Could we not find a way to do this in 20 minutes a day, right? Because it's a hell of a lot of time for us to be doing something we have no control over. Our brain takes over. And it's a lot, isn't it? So they like the fact that they're not going against what we know, right? We know that in any 24-hour period, you need to be 8 hours, 30-odd% of that needs to be in this recovery state, right? That's a fact. If you start challenging that, 6 hours, 5 hours, then you know the consequences, right? But this business of all in one place is also counterproductive. So they love it when they start going, did that 30 minutes, smash the evening. Did that at 12 o'clock at night. Did that at 11 o'clock. Didn't even, I got back from the game, absolutely wired, but I stayed awake for another cycle and just got 2 cycles because I knew that if I tried to go to sleep, I'm wired from the game. I need to chill out, hydrate, listen to some tunes, maybe play a game, bring it all down. And I could have got 3 cycles, but I chose to just have 2 because the bit of just not rushing into the house and diving into bed, so it's all this mindset about not worrying about it, but knowing how to reveal it and just understanding that if you looked at what you were doing yesterday, you had a very random approach of a start time, a sleep time. Nothing really was focused on your recovery or your ability to sleep. It's just you crack on with your day. There's no relationship with circadian rhythms. There's no relationship with chronotype. There's no sort of structure to what you're doing. There's no definitive guide. So you can safely say you have got the most random approach to this that you could ever imagine. So why would you spend, it's 8 hours asleep. Well, there's at least an hour before then of, getting your PJs on. There's at least, half an hour or so in the morning from point of weight, just trying to get yourself going. So this is not 8 hours. This could be 9 or 10 hours out of 24 that you are allocating to sleep. And all you've got is the most randomest approach ever. Now, where in anybody's coaching world would you apply those protocols? No way. No way. So why did you do it for 30% of the day?
So what were some of the if people weren't getting their full allocation of sleep that they would need, what were the negative impacts you were seeing?
What, from the quality of sleep?
Yeah, so injuries.
It's endless. It's endless. That's why there's so many variables that can impact on your ability to sleep. There are also, you could attach the human recovery is all about these stages of going into a sleep state, right? And as you wander through these stages, some of the stages, they're all beneficial to you. The light sleep stages, all the slow wave brainwave patterns. But the bit that you sort of classify as deep sleep, REM, non-REM, can only reveal itself maybe 20% of any period. So it's not like you're in it all the time. And so that's the area where your brain literally puts you in the most vulnerable position as a human being, right? You are in your most vulnerable state in deep sleep. So to get there, a number of factors need to be in place. So if you don't get that level of recovery, then you're not, whatever you want to call it, repairing, rejuvenating, giving organs, muscles, joints, thoughts, this, to allow them a bit of respite, to replenish, to repair, and things like that. Is that if you're not getting that, then literally you could point it at absolutely everything. So the long-term consequences, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, shorter life than you would have imagined, organ failure, this sort of stuff. In the immediate one, anxiety, stress, worry, suicide, burnout, addictive behaviors, relationships, anger management, becoming a shadow of who you actually are, but you don't notice it. You just suddenly become who you are, and you think that's your PV, that's who you are, and you're at your best. But actually, what we do is, there's somebody else who's just a little quicker. Their decisions a little better. Their awareness, things don't hit them. So you kind of think we should be the healthiest, fittest, most knowledge human population that have ever walked on this planet. Why? And I don't talk for the whole world, but why over the last few years I've heard nothing more than mental health and well-being, and all the associated side effects, whatever age group you're in, this big social experiment. Why are we getting that? And I think it's just because we've just been applying a very, very random approach to something that is far more significant to us as human beings than we've ever looked at. We've always said it's important. We always know it's important. But I really think there's a long way to go for us to really understand what's going on here, and to be able to develop and keep redefining this process. And that's why it's great to be working with a lot of young people and professionals like yourselves, is that, I may have been redefining it over 2 decades in a sort of random journey way. And maybe there is something to work on with what I've created, but let's go again. Let's go again, because that's the next step for us.
I think I read as well that if you don't get if you start to dip below your 6 hours of sleep, you become 70% more likely to get a physical injury as an athlete as well, which is an insane way of looking at it. And I think you're right with our relationship to how we sleep and the way we sleep and our environment. And that's kind of the next bit I wanted to talk about, the environment in which you sleep, because I know a part of the story I'd listened to from you before, and I found partly amazing and hilarious at the same time, which was your work with Team Sky, and the fact that with those riders, recovery is everything. So the fact that they were finishing a Tour de France stage, and you were at the hotel before, changing the hotel room, setting them up with the beds that you'd created for them. And what are the environments that you found that promote that deep sleep, that REM sleep, are promoting it as best as possible? And are there things that people can do to look at it? Because I know you've also spoken about lux and getting a certain amount of light to certain times of the day. So I know that has an influence on sleep. If you can explain that a little bit more.
So about the environment.
Yeah.
I think it's... I was always quite fascinated because, I went camping with my family as a young kid, and we'd go outside and we'd be in tents and everything else, and all the security of the home's gone, and no mattresses, no fancy things. And sort of over the years, I just started to reflect that actually, as I started working with different types of athletes, like professional mountaineers or single-handed round the world sailors or crazy people who do the race across America on a mountain bike for 13 days, whatever it might be, is like, we're actually designed as human beings to sleep on anything, anywhere, anytime. That's what we do on this planet. So some people adopt this kind of approach and some people have to adopt that approach. So when you look at human beings on this planet, some people just curl up on the floor and that's it. Some people have got bedrooms and this and aircon and that and all sorts of stuff, and fancy mattresses with thousands of springs and NASA foam and all sorts of stuff. And you just go, well, if you're going to actually try to not let this have an impact, if you're on the Tour de France, which you mentioned, and that's 3 weeks on tour, 200k a day, up vertical mountains, all sorts of stuff. Wow, right?
Mm.
And then we just go into this hotel, and nobody's thought about it. We don't know who was in there the night before, and we're chucking, Bradley Wiggins and the guys in these rooms. So they come off the back of a day. They're doing all their, post-race stuff, massage, all that sort of stuff. But you sort of like, nobody really wants to go rushing upstairs and go into that room because it's not their room. It's sort of like, I've got to go there for a bit to race tomorrow. So they're kind of more focused on preparing for tomorrow rather than actually going to the bedroom to sleep. So we just thought, right, if part of this sort of aggregation marginal gains and these 7 steps, we look at environment, let's check what they do at home, where they live at home. And if we can tick some boxes there about exposure to lights and blackout curtains and hygiene and the right layers of products so we can get them into a fetal position on the opposite side to their dominant side so we can get a nice postural alignment, get those layers in to make it really nice and released. And if we use that particular process, we make sure the linen, antibacterial, easy wash, so we can change the linen more often. What do you mean by that, Nick? Said the squad. Well, when I change the bed linen on my bed and I put this lovely fresh stuff on and it's like cool and clean, I kind of think I want to get in it. And I kind of think I'm going to have a good night's sleep. So I try to do that at least twice a week. Right? Because why not? But a lot of people I talk to, once a week's probably a bit much. It could be even 2 weeks. So what's all that about? And so they're all nodding, going, yeah, same for me. Fresh linen. It's like a fresh top. It's like a fresh pair of trainers, a fresh pair of socks. It's like a feel good. You wouldn't keep them on all day, would you? Training session after training session, you put a fresh set on, wouldn't you? Okay. So it's kind of like, oh, wow. So we ticked all those boxes. Because we're using layers, we then said, well, why don't we take those layers with us? What you say, take the bed to the hotel? No, we'll create an individual kit of the layers. So what they're sleeping on at home that they're used to, the smell, the feel, the touch, they know we've ticked all the boxes, fetal position, opposite side of your body, lying on that, bang, curl up, off you go. Right? No pillows, getting in the way, playing with them, blocking the airways off, chucking them around, bang. So we'll put that in a kit bag, fold it up, and we'll literally take it into the room, unzip it, ride her in, curls up, opposite side of the fetal position, completely mindset this stuff works. Whether it does or not is irrelevant because of what might have happened during the day, but they know it works, so they'll get the best recovery. So just dive in it, no problems, it's there, zip it back up, take it to the next hotel.
Yeah.
So while they're in the peloton for hours on end, they know that when they get back, they'll do the massage and the team talk and this and everything else. But what they're also motivated to do is to get up into the bedroom, dive into their own kit that was there last night, curl up, fetal position, get the recovery, get up, and let's go and have another day. Now that, all you could see is that the thought process, the mindsets of everybody around was like, we can see a change here. And then you start going nuts. Because then we would go in with high particle air filters, HEPAs. We'd stick that in the corner of the room and drag all the muck out of the room, right? We would obviously, if we controlled the light, it would be bin liners and black tape.
Right.
We're not going around with curtains. You know?
No, yeah.
The black tape would go on the standby on the hotel TV.
Yeah.
Block it off. We'd just cover up, under the door, where the corridor lights, creeping under the door, towel, whatever. We'd wipe every surface down with antibacterial wipes. It's really strange talking about this in the climate we're in right now.
Yeah.
Literally, all those surfaces would be wiped down to make sure nothing's in that room that somebody else left there that might appear in 5 days' time when it matters on a tour. The sort of Dyson, I'm not promoting the brand, but any powerful handheld vacuum cleaner. So we could go around and remove everything else that the maids don't take out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we it sort of starts off with, let's try a little bit of that. Then it comes into that. Then we go on a Giro d'Italia. Then we go on a Vuelta. Then we end up on a Tour de France. And then we come back and go, right, we're going to go again here. And suddenly you start hearing these conversations that there's riders in the peloton who are actually taking naps. They're having CRP moments, because anybody who knows about cycling, and I'm no professor in it, but in the peloton, it's about protecting and throughout the day. So actually, some people are inside that peloton having a CRP because they're not exposing the same energy. So they're kind of think, I'm taking a CRP in a peloton. And in the evening, sleeping in cycles in my own kit, zip it back up, no viruses. So it kind of, all the other teams started to go, hang on a minute, there's 25 sleep kits coming out the back of a van and going into this hotel. What's all that about? That's nuts. But when you started to see that there was better physical recovery during the period between the two riding periods, at the end of that day and the start of the next. So there's all those little factors, like you mentioned, injury recovery, rehabilitation, mental stuff was important. Confidence that, am I going to get all the way to the last 2 days of the tour and I've picked up a virus? All of this anxiety that happens in any sport is, are you going to get all the way there and then something's going to happen? You're going to crash or have a puncture. So you're always fighting that anxiety of failure because you want to win. So the more you keep taking them away, you won't get anything from that hotel room. You don't have to sleep on somebody else's crappy mattress. We've designed it for you. We're protecting you. So, whatever it is, just dive in there, grab whatever you can, and let's go on again.
Yeah. You mentioned there about CRPs, and I kind of want to pick up on it earlier, and I'll do it now, which was, you mentioned that you can do the CRP without actually being asleep. So what you're really talking about is actually viewing it as recovery. So for someone who is not even an athlete and just working throughout the day, just taking breaks, and is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's all it is. I think in sort of the workshop presentation slide, you're trying to sort of redefine what it is, and you try to find, as coaches, whatever it might be for that individual, right, that might trigger their understanding of it. So it's sort of like, if I grab hold of your arm, Lewis, and we've had a pretty stressful day, work, this, problems, family, whatever, and we just walk outside and go and sit by the river or the coast, within a very short period of time, just a few minutes, life isn't that bad, is it, Lewis? Right?
No.
And sort of like, what have we done? We've actually changed what we're looking at. So once you start to understand that you can, and this will sound very simplistic for a lot of your listeners, and I'm sorry for that, but when you are trying to, we have different levels of language, don't we? So if I'm talking to some professional guys in sport, we kind of talk a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But if I'm talking to a bunch of under nines in an academy, wow, there's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have this balance. And I think it's sort of, if I'm always looking, right, at a scary game, right, or I'm looking at people solving problems, lots of people rushing around, and all my brain is processing that information and creating a response. If I shift it and look at my favorite view, my favorite coast, my favorite set of mountains, my favorite partner, my kids, whatever it might be. If I just put it there for a bit, suddenly that's what's being processed. So I'm reacting to that slightly differently. So there's a little recovery break, distractive. Maybe if I just think about that and also know that not everywhere on this planet, but we do know that on motorways and autobahns where we travel at 50, 70, 120 kilometers an hour on a very dangerous motorway or autobahn,
Yeah.
and your brain will microsleep you while you're doing that. Actually put you to sleep.
Yeah.
What on earth's that about?
Yeah.
That's really dangerous. It just reminds you that you can't force sleep. You can't try to sleep. You just have to have a nice rhythm to your day that reveals it. And if it wants to reveal it, you will feel it. So sometimes, as long as my particular routine, which is very common, is 4 cycles. That's 12:30 to 6:30. 4 cycles, 6 hours. 6:30 start. First 90 minutes of the day to 8 o'clock. That's all about hydration, bowel, bladder, light, all of that sort of stuff. Do it. Every 90 minutes, I'm thinking about a distracted break. I don't have an alarm on. You can if you want, but I don't, because I like to just keep this nice and fluid. So we've been talking now for some time, and I can start to feel it, right? Okay.
So,
you kind of feel that I've been doing something, in a specific way with no little breaks for too long. So you can start to feel it. So what happens is a little distracted break, because I need to go to the toilet, Lewis. Now, you're not going to stop me, are you? Because the alternative is I'm going to wee my pants, okay?
yeah.
So you'll stop the recording, chat to your readers. I'll be back in a minute, right? All I'm doing is creating a little break to protect myself from the next period. Water bottles, hydration on your desk. Fill them halfway up, not right to the top. So you have to go and get some more, more hydration. Yeah. You're just trying to create little breaks. And the CRP, I just showed somebody that it could be sound, sensory. It could be just something you do. It could be just sitting by a window. It could be a little private space. It could be headphones on. It could be anywhere. It's your own little space. And I think what happens is, rather than sort of using naps, napping when you're just absolutely knackered and overtired in a random way, then people don't get any benefit from that, really. But if you've always got this little 30-minute window, then what happens is your brain sort of starts to kick in because it likes this rhythm. And it will start to let you know that it's highly likely, Lewis, that when we do our little 30-minute CRP today, I'm going to put you to sleep, right? Because you can kind of feel it or whatever. Yeah. And so you go, okay, well, I'm probably just going to stay at my desk, nice and safe. I don't have to go to bed. I don't have to curl up in a pod. I'll just put the headphones on. And I'm just going to, do this. This is it. I can nap on a tube. Just do that. Maybe because I can feel it, I put an alarm on for 30 minutes because I don't want to roll past it. Okay? And I'll just let it happen. And if it does happen, it doesn't happen. But you start to feel it. And the key thing is if you don't feel like you're going to go into sleep, still do it. Still do it. Because that's a really great moment. Like I say, is even in... there's a picture on the slides. There's a guy facing a beautiful coastline. Headphones are on, and he's facing the wall. Right? And he's looking at his favourite coastline, listening to his favourite coastal noises. He wants to live there. That was his favourite where it was brought up with. But he's actually in his office. That's just a visual on the wall. Yeah. Those are just the sounds in his head. And all he's done, he's stood up and looked at that. And that's all he's doing. Bang. Sorted. And nice. I think when you looked at all of those lovely things about environment and you go, you're going camping, you get completely chopped into that circadian rhythm, no protection, following it, no fancy mattresses, no this, no that. So when you come back into your own home environment, a good thing to do is just in your head, is just imagine taking everything out of your bedroom, everything, and then just putting back in there what is actually designed to help you sleep and stay in a recovery state as a human being. And you start to realize that there's lots of stuff in there, lots of things you put into there, like partners, fancy this and fancy that. And the other strange thing, it's the only room, I think for most, correct me if I'm wrong, Lewis, but I have a dining room. I don't call it a dining table room.
Yeah.
I have a kitchen. I don't call it a cooker room or a fridge room, do I? I have a lounge. I don't call it the sofa room or the chair room. I don't do that. So why is it the most important room that takes up 30% of your day, where you're supposed to get true mental and physical recovery, why do you call it a bedroom? It's not. It's a sleeping room with a bed in it, plus other stuff that either should or shouldn't be in there. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we always know from architects and stuff like that, building has bring the outside in. Well, we can't live outside. We can't be completely synchronized to the second. But hang on a minute. Understand how far you are away from it. So maybe you should be able to, like you said, bring light into your bedroom, whether it's artificial or whether it's the sunlight, actual daylight. Use that. What sort of visuals do you have around you? What sort of colors and everything else? Because the more that sort of, I'm not saying you've got to make it like a woodland or a mountain, but I think you do have to sort of, it's thinking about these things. And you know, there's a lot of people during lockdown have been sort of going, well, we've got this stuff over there in the house. Why don't we bring some of that into the bedroom, into the sleeping room? And then you've got a lot of people thinking, you know, maybe we should stop sleeping together because we're not actually designed to sleep with other human beings. We like the sex and the spooning and the security and all that sort of stuff. But when we actually go into a sleep state, funny enough, we turn away from each other and don't really want to see each other. So, you know, maybe we should get a bigger surface to sleep on, or further away from each other, or maybe we should do this and do that. And it's kind of that whole lovely process, which is when you're talking about CRPs. I'll give you one very quick example. Is sleeping in hotels or different environments can be quite stressful. Recovery is reduced and everything else. And one little mindset thing is this particular person was brought up in Barcelona, in the city. That's where his family lived, in apartments, very common. So he was very associated with city noise, you know, 24 hours a day. So when he would end up somewhere where it's not like that, then we just recorded Barcelona city noise on his earphone. And so he would take a 5, 10 minute, 20 minute CRP or pre-sleep, just listening to something that's actually very familiar to him, just ticking boxes, you know. For some who really struggle with anything, we just got them onto their phones, just to record them reading a sort of bedtime story to their children, and put it on there. So their CRP was about connecting into that, or their pre-sleep routine, or their little 2-minute break was just doing that, because immediately it was so difficult for them to not focus on that environment, those sounds, what that means to them as individuals, and it just shifts you. Right? So it's always about finding these little ways, Lewis. Sometimes they can be very individual to certain people, but that's what we mean. It's a long answer to your question, mate. But that's why you try to get as far away from napping and trying to sleep as you possibly can, and just get this recovery process in a far more natural way.
Yeah. So I think that just before we kind of finish off, really, is those little hacks there that you're talking about almost is what are well, you've got, but what are the also, even before we get onto those, what are the actionable things that people can do? So is it really darkening your environment? Is it making sure the temperature of the room? Is it what are the certain things that you would say, as much as there's individualized, is there anything that's generic?
It's actually, from my point of view, it's none of that.
Right. Okay.
I think what you can certainly read or listen to my book, That'll get you started, get the education. The technique we've been talking about, the R90 technique, is got 7 aggregational marginal gain steps, and they are 1 to 7. And it's just a little journey. So number 1 is circadian rhythms. Tap it in your browser, just get your knowledge up, okay? You don't have to be a scientist, just get your knowledge up. You must do that because this is start of your journey. Number 2, but you can do it online or just, whatever, have a look, identify your chronotype. And more importantly, people around you, their chronotype. So just get that in place and see how you can start to. Number 3 is think polyphasically. So as we explained before, natural chronotype, wait time, chop your day up in 90-minute cycles. Now you can start to see this 35 cycle, 5-a-day thing appearing. Then the next one is pre and post, right? So we're up to that one now. And that is just understanding that post-sleep is the most important one. Start your day, really importantly, lots of light, particularly 10,000 lux, daylight, dawn wake simulators. If you're a PMA, you need loads of light because you've got to get bowel and bladder open. You've got to get new fuel in there. You've got to allow that serotonin to build up to get you going. So post-sleep. Pre-sleep is too late. So it's all about what you're doing while you're awake. So you change your mindset. Polyphasic sleeping, understand circadian rhythms, got my chronotype in place, know that the start of the day with a consistent wake time is key. Now I'm on my journey. Little distracted breaks, little cycle there. Wow, I'm stopping worrying about it. 3 cycles there. Now we're moving. So the next bit is when you get to number 5 is just a nice balanced approach to activity and recovery. Right? And so you've got this little 24-hour cycle. You've got this 35 cycles a week. You've got this, you've got that. Now you can start, yeah. So I can see it. So you've got number 5 is just now understanding that you've now put recovery into your day, but it's actually active recovery. It's positive active recovery. It's not doing nothing. It's a much better approach. Number 6, suddenly check your environment. So you were starting putting it out. So is your bedroom south facing? Does the sun rise through the windows into your bedroom? Do you live in daylight saving time? Which means you have to shift the clocks and you have a change in temperature, in exposure to light. So you either use blackout blinds to protect yourself from early sunrise because of these things, or you use the sunrise to wake you naturally. If you can't do that, you have things like dawn wake simulators in your bedroom to recreate that process because it's not going on. Yeah, and then you as we touched on, you make some checks with all your environment, and that's when you can start doing that. And number 7 is products. The products you choose to sleep on with, like mattresses and pillows and stuff like that. We can put so much emphasis on that. But if you haven't gone through the journey of 1 to 6, number 7, forget it. Yeah. So if you just dive in at number 6 or dive in at number 7, right? And just go blackout blinds, no dawn wake simulator, ain't going to work. If you go and buy a fancy mattress and expect it to do this, it won't work. If all the other things are out of kilter. So the quick sort of Nick's top tips is just those 7 steps. You don't have to get too deep. Just bang your way through it, and then the other bits will fall in line, and you'll be sorted. And it's almost like you only have to do it once. It's not like you've got to sign up for, 6 years of coaching and training or subscriptions. It's almost like once you've actually just explored this, like we've been talking to about this, it's not scientific. It's almost like you've heard it before, and I've just reminded you of it. Yeah. So you're set for life now. There isn't anything else to think about, is there?
Yeah. So as of products, what were the ones you've got? I know you've got something there.
When you've got this, I think you mentioned it earlier in a very articulate way. When you sort of got this worry out, and you're just going, it's fine, just do 3 cycles, bang it in there. Yeah. So what? It's a problem. We'll sort it. Let's take advantage of that. It's great. So once you get into that place, then you can start thinking, could I have some ring interventions in that could make that even better? And that might just be recording kids on your phone as an intervention. It might be doing that sound. It might be thinking, well, I tell you what, breathing is a real important thing, because when you go into sleep, nose breathing, okay? Inhale, exhale. We're all mouth breathers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we had things like breathe right strips. put them on your nose over there to open up the nasal passages.
Yeah.
Now you've got things like nasal dilators that go inside the nose and open that up. And that just encourages you to breathe in and out through your nose. And if you want to get into those deeper sleep stages, in those vulnerable stages, then nose breathing is brilliant. So, there's some fascinating stuff, and it's a real game changer, right? You can get yourself a book called The Oxygen Advantage.
100%.
Look at it.
Yeah.
This is about breathing.
So The Oxygen Advantage is a fantastic book. That's
Patrick will like you saying that.
It's actually there, and I'll hopefully one day try and get Patrick on. But
but that's, you sort of look at that, and then you start thinking about there are pillow sprays. We used to do things like partners' perfumes or deodorants or washing powders. So when they're traveling away, you've got that sensory familiarization, which is really important. But now you've got biochemists like This Works, this company here. Most people might know them as a health and beauty company.
Yeah,
they are biochemists, and they put together ingredients that actually triggers the brain to react in a certain way. So you've got things you can spray on your pillows in your room that's this trigger. So a CRP could be
and just take it in.
You've got things with melatonin in them that you spray on your tongue. You have to be careful when you start going into those particular areas. But there's loads of things that you can use from familiarization. Like we said before, if you can't get rid of your flat screen, put a little bit of black tape over the standby.
Yeah.
You've got little lamps. You've got big lamps, dorm weight simulated lamps that you can put in the kitchen there, because all you're trying to do is recreate. These give off 10,000 lux, right? I have got one. Which way is this?
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Okay. All it is 15 minutes. Okay. Because I'm not outside.
Yeah.
So the other little one is just go onto the App Store and just download yourself a free light meter. This one's called the Lux Light Meter.
Yep.
Okay. Now it's just measuring the level of light off the camera. Right. So where I'm sat right now, brightly lit, daylight, sat with you, you can see the light.
Yeah.
It's measuring around 959 lux in front of you. And if I just go by the window, it's over 3,000.
Right.
If I put it outside, beyond the glass isn't that, it's 78,000 today.
And it's 10,000 we're looking for.
And the 10,000 is the average.
Yeah.
When you're outside in a normal process, that's the kind of average exposure, because you're looking up, looking down, because it's all through the light receptors. So that's what comes off these things.
Yeah.
Right? The little lamps. But it's almost like a 15-minute hit, right? So when you look at exposure to light, you can see that a lot of people, when you wander around your house with a little light meter, the difference between me just moving 1 meter that way, right, has just put me in serotonin land. And serotonin is because of the light. And that's all my happy mood motivation hormone. And I need a balance of this in every 4 phases. If I just move back, I've just reduced that big time. So if I spent all my day in this level of light, I'm sort of making it more difficult for myself. So it's always about little balances. And I know you like this one. But if you can actually take light. It's called a little human charger. And rather than through the eye receptors, you can shove it down through the ear canal. Right back. So this is the 10,000 lux, but it's using the ear canal like your buds. It only lasts for 15 minutes, so you can't overcharge. Just stick that on my pocket. Now I can do anything I want. I'm not restricted to having some lamp around, right?
Yeah.
So I can use the lamp in the morning as a weight tool, but then, I can ride a bike, I can train, I can walk, I can be in the office, I can do anything. And I can travel, going through time zones, resetting yourself into time zones. Brilliant, right?
Yeah.
And so there is things, but in isolation, Lewis, right? In isolation, shoving something up your nose, sticking a bit of tape on your TV, reading Patrick's book, getting supplements to help you sleep at night because they're full of valerian and all sorts of things. Whatever it might be, in isolation or just combinations of, without those sort of 7 steps in place, they don't have the same amount of effect.
Yeah.
And they end up becoming almost like joining the gym in January and leaving it in March type concept. They really just don't have it. And I think it's much more important if you go through those 7 steps, really find your approach, which we've had a great conversation about. You get that in place, then you can use some of these things. And trackers become more beneficial to you because there's already a medical term for anxiety created by trackers measuring sleep, right? Called orthosomnia, right? And that's because we're looking at data in the morning about our sleep.
Didn't know about this. This is fascinating.
Yeah. It's sort of like giving a sleep tracker to Usain Bolt.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I've never tracked my sleep. I don't know how much deep sleep I've ever had. I don't know how many. I haven't got a clue about any at all. I just went to sleep. Sometimes I slept well, sometimes I didn't. But I'm the fastest man on the planet. Any questions? Right? So it's kind of, you suddenly wake up in the morning and you only got 6.25 hours, so much in deep sleep and so much in that, and you just go, well, it's doing it off this, which is all about movements or heart rate or pulse. It's not coming from here, brainwave patterns, so it's guessing a bit. I feel absolutely crap, but it says I had a good night's sleep here. Oh, why has that happened? The data said that I didn't sleep very well last night, but actually I feel okay, to be honest. Does it tell me what to do? Does it tell me what I did that created this? What should I do for the rest of the day to repeat it? What am I actually trying to achieve?
Yeah, that's
I'm trying to achieve 4 cycles a night with a 30-minute cycle, or I'm just trying to do 8 hours a night consistently, but when that changes. And it's sort of, I think it's not to be anti these things, but what happens is, there's a product here which is just amazing. I won't tell you who it is because it's a little thing. You put a little tab on your forehead. One of these little things. Put this little tab on your forehead and it connects it up to this little pill. And what happens is you can program it that if you're sleeping in a fetal position on the opposite side of this, fetal position, if you move out of that position, it senses it and vibrates.
Right, okay.
To encourage you to go back into the side position. So if you move out of it, it senses it and almost like vibrates to wake you up to go back to it. Now you start that is actually trying to get you to sleep on your side, but it's actually using hang on a minute. You suddenly start sticking that on your forehead and start doing that. It's going to keep waking you up to tell you to move or this. And if you're on the wrong mattress, there's no point buying it. If you've already got your room like that and you haven't got no idea like that. So I always say there's loads of technological advancements. And if you want to, if you're on something that's really hard, sticking that on your forehead ain't going to work.
Yeah.
Because the surface underneath you is not going to ask you to do this. So it's kind of, there's so much coming out and they all make loads of sense and back everything up. But you've just got to be really careful about spending your dollars and diving into these areas.
And they are they're like the cherry on top, aren't they?
Right?
So they're like the cherry on top. Because what you're saying there is go do the work, go do the educate. I like your point about go educate yourself about it. Go educate yourself. Go understand what sleep really is. And I think it doesn't actually take that long. For something like sleep, like the documentation is there. Like if you don't want to document, books, your book. There's your talk. There's anything you can go and find. Whichever way you consume the information, there is enough way of getting that information.
Easily repeatable, isn't it? You
totally.
Can very confidently have a conversation with somebody else, and I hear it all the time. When we've had podcasts and people look at all the stuff that we do, and I, sometimes by accident, I end up listening to them, and they're coaching other people, and they sound better than me. You know, because it's just very easy. But please, you know, all you need to do is get that first step in place. It's really easy. Don't take it too much. You can dive in and get personally coached by me if you want for 45 quid. You can do little courses. You can read books. You don't have to invest a lot, but just make that before you start chucking your money at things that are just going to probably not be a solution to you.
It's definitely a long-term solution as well, rather than that quick fix. Because a lot of people will want to get that quick fix. I'll take these pills. I'll go and do this, take that. But it's educate yourself. Find out about who you are with your sleep. What is sleep? What is your relationship with sleep, as you said, and then go from there.
You know, all we have to do is anybody who's listening to this who actually sleeps brilliantly, could they actually just get in touch and tell us how they do it? Because I've never met anybody who can actually tell me how they have brilliant sleep, other than this one athlete looked very suspiciously at me in this workshop, and I say, is there anybody in here who has no problems with sleep and sleeps brilliantly? And everybody else is going, well, not really. But then this one person went, I do. You know, I'm the man. And I said, tell us how you do it. He said, I take 2 of these every night.
Oh, all right, okay.
Basically, you know, he was just taking sleeping tablets.
No.
The concept of like, it's fine. These things help me to sleep. That's what you do, don't you? What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
I want to sleep. They put me to sleep.
Yeah.
Is there anything wrong with that? Where do you get it from?
But you're not associating it with your performance, and I think everything that we've spoken about here has been about those gains that you're trying to make, those real shifts. And if you're just slapping a band-aid on it at the end of the day is what you're doing. If you're doing stuff like that,
it's highs and lows, and what you want is more consistent and sustainable levels of recovery, both mentally and physically. You want to have a nice balance to how it all rolls. You want to protect yourself. So you want to reveal the best you all the time and protect yourself as well by redefining your approach. And whether it's in any event or running into an event or during a particular game or whatever it is, or post, is you want to know that you are always going to be at least at your best to allow these things to impact positively, not negatively. And that's the key thing to any team or any individual is not only qualifying to be there, but actually when they are there, they can deliver.
Yeah,
that's the bit that matters. You know, right at the end of the day, there's no point putting all this in if there are things that you're putting yourself risk factors involved. Because if there's too many risk factors, they're likely to reveal themselves and you won't make it. So,
yeah, that's brilliant. And I think that's the perfect place to finish on as well. Nick, I really appreciate your time. I'm sure you've got a CRP up your sleeve now for the rest of your day.
I had one during the podcast.
Yeah, perfect.
I was listening to you.
Yeah.
No, it's fine.
No, brilliant. But people can find you at sportsleepcoach.com. And you're on Instagram _sportsleepcoach. But look, I really appreciate your time.